FM 90.7, FM Blacksburg. Sorry about that, y'all. We just were told that we were on air, so it's all good. Again, welcome to Hokie Weather Watch. I hope you all are having a great Sunday. It's beautiful weather outside, and we're here to talk about the weather today. So for those of you that don't know, Hokie Weather Watch Live is a radio talk show geared towards the only thing that impacts all of us, the weather. The science, the communication, or even the pop culture influences that the weather brings to our daily lives. We're going to touch on it all. Thanks for tuning in, as always. And now it's the best time of the week where we get to introduce a whole new panel for you here today. So, Jamie, why don't you start us off, man?
Yeah, I'm back. My name is James Morrow.
I'm so glad that we let you back in.
I know. After last week, I mean, you guys talked about my tweets enough. I figured you guys wouldn't let me back. But I do appreciate it, and I am back. And for those that haven't been following along for too long, I graduated from Virginia Tech with a degree in meteorology and geography, and I'm currently working on a master's degree as I'm also working for the National Weather Service right here in Blacksburg, Virginia.
Man of many talents.
Yes, many, but not as many as you, Nick.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So, question of the week is actually 3 questions. Okay, are you ready for this?
3. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be a big deal. So, Halloween is tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you my question is, did you have plans? Are you going to be doing something for Halloween? Okay, that's the first question. Second question is, if you do have plans, or if you did do something, did you dress up, or are you going to dress up? And then third of all, if that is to you, what are you dressing up as, or what did you dress up as?
Well, actually, so my answer relies on your plans over the next few days, Nick, and actually the plans of many in this room. So I haven't done anything yet. I am working, unfortunately, tomorrow on Halloween, so that might keep me from doing too much. But, you know, every year I have this grand idea of what to dress up as, and unfortunately it's a group costume. I'm not talking about couples costume. I'm talking about multiple people.
Okay.
So let me know if you guys are interested after this.
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Oh, do you?
I think you've told me this before, but go for it.
I have, so.
Can we just be one big supercell?
Well, that'd be cool,
yeah,
too.
I'll be the I can.
Well, along those lines, I'll stick with the geography theme. My goal was I would always wanted to be a tree, but I didn't want to be an alone tree. So
yes,
you've
told me this before.
Yes, I have. So wouldn't it be cool to be a forest? I mean, look, if you're going downtown Blacksburg and you see a group of trees walking down the street, you could be a forest. Now, I wouldn't want to be the lone tree. That's just sad. But if you had a bunch of trees, you have a forest that's walking down the street.
That's probably the most creative thing I've ever heard.
I think it'd be brilliant. So
is it, though? I don't know.
I have never seen it. Have you?
I mean, no, but...
So if you guys are interested in being a forest with me, then I'm all in. But if not, I'll probably be lame and just kind of stay at home and get ready for work the next day. So,
okay.
So
all right.
I'll leave that up to you. So
duly noted. Caitlin, take it away.
Hey guys, I'm Caitlin Purcell. I'm a sophomore here at Tech. I study communications and meteorology is my minor. I'm current incumbent WUVT chief meteorologist, so clearly love the radio.
Okay.
Now, as for your loaded question.
Yes, please.
Well, I have a test on Monday and 2 on Tuesday, so Monday night will not be really fun for me.
Okay.
So I got my fun on this weekend, and I was actually Kim Possible.
Oh, my goodness.
Man,
Tell me that does not suit me fairly well, right?
Right.
KP, Caitlin Purcell, Kim Possible.
I can see that.
I was taunted my entire childhood. Now I'm just choosing to embrace it.
So this is the only year you've done KP?
Yeah.
Wow.
Really?
First year,
Did you have, like, the ringtone and everything? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That should stay as
That's
your
amazing.
ringtone.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I'm considering it.
Sweet. Aaron, take it away, man.
All right, hi guys. My name's Aaron. I am a junior here at Virginia Tech studying meteorology, and I'm the lead meteorologist of Hokie Weather Watch. All right, so to your question,
Yes.
I actually hung out with some friends yesterday night,
Okay.
and we all just hung out, had a good time, and I was a army man.
Okay.
Not from Toy Story. That would have been pretty badass.
Yeah.
But I think, so I was an army man, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah, so go ahead. How about you, Nick? Do you have any plans?
No, I'm really boring. I'm probably just gonna watch a movie with my girlfriend. But
So-
that's about it.
So it sounds like the forest idea is out the window again this year, huh?
Jamie, I love you, but
Maybe next year.
maybe next
right?
year.
Right.
And last but not least, we have Jen Henderson with us today. Jen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you.
I'm a PhD student here at Virginia Tech, and this is my 6th year, so it's getting long. Science and technology studies is what is kind of my major.
Okay.
But I study the weather warning process in the National Weather Service, and I look at forecaster challenges. So I'm a big fan of people like Jamie. I spend a lot of time hanging out.
So does that mean that
with
you're gonna be joining Jamie in his
well,
costume?
it would be a stand of aspen. That would be awesome.
Oh,
right?
now you're getting into
Because
like.
then it would be colorful, and you
That
have
would
to
be.
move together.
Yeah, I mean it's autumn, right? And then if you start losing people, you have deforestation. I mean,
Oh my
isn't
goodness.
this like the
Oh,
best
jeez.
idea ever? We keep talking about the whole show, but I mean it's just
That
gonna
would
get
be
better
awesome.
and better, really.
Yeah, no, I do it. I would do
Oh
it.
my
And
goodness.
I didn't get to dress up for Halloween. It was my husband's birthday this weekend,
Okay.
so I played the part of host.
Gotcha.
We had a bunch of his. He teaches in art departments. We had a bunch of grad students at the house. We called it a rager, but it started at 6 p.m., so I don't know that it was technically a rager.
That's late in my books
Yeah,
nowadays.
close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's great to have you, Jen.
thank you.
Did I introduce myself? Did I do that?
Why don't you go again?
I'll-
You did talk about a little bit of what you were
I'll
doing.
go for
over
it.
at Halloween.
I graduated from tech in meteorology last year. One of the founding members of Hokie Weather Watch. Jamie was the man in charge, but I helped him out a little bit. Well,
You're still helping me out, man.
okay. I'll take it. I'll take it. I currently work for WVTF's, which is an NPR station in Roanoke, and I'm a ginger and proud of it. That's what it is written on the script. So
Oh my God.
I think that's been there all semester too, and I
I'm just
don't.
finally glad you read it. It took you this long. I was
Just
worried
in
about
case
you.
there was any doubt, I am a ginger
Ginger.
and I am proud of it. So on that note, we have a great show for you today.
We do.
We've got Jen here, and I'm super excited about it. Just to talk about meteorology and social science and the stuff that goes in those fields that mix together and how they work together. I'm just super excited. It's stuff that I personally am really interested in, so I'm really excited to have Jen here today. We're going to be talking about the role of social science in meteorology, talk about the National Weather Service's Watch, Warning, and Advisory System. We're going to talk about how there was some football played in a hurricane just a few weeks ago. And, of course, it's what is a weather show without a forecast, so Aaron will have a forecast later for you in the show. But first things first, we want to make sure that you have the ability, and my voice just cracked really bad, but it's fine.
Just play it off.
You have the ability to interact with the show either live or throughout the rest of the week. So, Caitlin, can you let them know how they can do that?
Of course. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at the handle HWWLive Watch and join the conversation using the hashtag HWWLive. And we'd like everyone to participate. You know, Jamie, get some company out there in the Twitter world.
Jamie was the sole person, I think, all semester to tweet into the show last week.
Well, now I'll give someone else credit. I don't think she was using the right hashtag.
Oh, that's right.
Aaron's girlfriend was getting very upset for you guys
She
not
did.
calling her out. So just to save him, I'm gonna call her out. And
Special
maybe she's,
shout out.
Yeah. Do you have Twitter up today? So maybe if she's.
I do.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so we were watching, Savannah, if you want to tweet us back.
Yeah, and I think.
Please give me an opportunity for redemption, basically.
And I think we have possibly a Weather Service official or two tuning in too,
Listening in right
including
now.
our guest last week, Phil Heisel.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
We
feel
had-
free to join the conversation, guys.
yeah. So feel free
The
to.
thing that cracked me up last week is that Phil was here,
Mhm.
and Phil is kind of like your boss.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I didn't really think that through. I actually had an evaluation earlier this week, and luckily that didn't come up. But I'm kind of worried about next year, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to redeem myself
Yeah.
in his eyes. Here,
it was great, just wonderful. And Jamie, like, I have to tell this story because we almost didn't even make it to the show today, Jamie and
It was
I,
close. It was
because
close.
Jamie led me through some dark corners of Squires Hall that I didn't even know existed. And I went to school here, and I still don't know where we ended up and how we got here. But
Yeah.
but Jamie, you made it.
Yeah,
You made it.
we found the right. Well, first we got locked out of a. It seems like that's a pretty bad fire hazard when you're
Yeah.
trying to get out of a staircase. You're not able to do so, but. We did explore the music department here, which is very vast, and I hear good things about it, especially on their own walls. But yeah, so we luckily made it just in time to still be on air. But it was an adventure, wasn't it?
It was something.
Yeah.
So we're great. We're really excited to be here today. Let's take a break for a quick PSA.
Yeah. So WVT's Radiothon is currently ongoing. I believe this is the last day, and we'd just like to thank everybody who's supported us over the last week or so, and continue doing your thing. So
It's the last day, so be sure to pledge if you haven't already.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jamie. So first things first, we're gonna be talking to Jen. Jamie, you want to take it away, man?
Yeah, of course, Jen. First of all, this is highly anticipated. You know, the last few guests that we've had, we've mentioned some of these topics as teasers, and if you're following along, we're finally going to get to some today. But first of all, it's a pleasure to have you here. And you did mention that you were a PhD candidate. So you want to talk about a little bit about your history and how it's an unusual road into meteorology. It's not necessarily the one we've taken. So do you want to go into that?
Yeah, I think when I talk to a lot of meteorologists in my research and I ask them, how did you get interested in, being a forecaster? There's always some story when they're young kids. I saw a storm, or I love snow, or I saw a tornado, or it impacted our neighborhood. And when I was 12, there was a water spout over the Great Salt Lake that got me interested in weather, but I didn't know that there was such thing as meteorology, or I probably would have followed that path and become a meteorologist. And so instead, I actually had many paths, but eventually became a creative writer and started writing about the subculture of kind of storm chasing. And Dave Carroll here at Virginia Tech, who is amazing.
We have talked about on the show.
Yeah.
He I emailed him and said, can I please join one of your trips and see what it's like to be a storm chaser and write about it. And I got hooked. That year we ended up in Saragossa, Texas, because the weather patterns sucked and we had nothing for 10 days. In the middle of a 16-day trip. We had weather the first 2 days and last 2 days and nothing. So we're in Texas and we saw Saragossa, and it was this town that was hit in the 80s, and it didn't really look like much recovery had happened there, and they'd been hit a few times. And I just started wondering, what happened and what happened with the warning. There was a storm spotter that sort of notified the town when they were all hunkered down in this little community center. 30 people died that day during a Head Start graduation ceremony. All the parents pushed all the kids against a wall and got on top of the tables, and it was largely, a Hispanic population, Spanish speaking, and they didn't have sirens. I was thinking, what's going on here? Why don't we have a better warning system? What is a warning system? So I decided to come back for my PhD. So not as a meteorologist, but a lot of my friends in the social sciences focus on the public, people out, in the communities, like how do they understand weather? How do they get their warnings? Why don't they evacuate from hurricanes? I mean, all these questions that you all probably have. What's going on there? But I saw a huge need to sort of focus on what's going on with forecasters. And since warnings originate with the National Weather Service, and since we have one right in our backyard, and they're very generous, Phil and Dave and Steve, the leadership there, invited me in and said, hey, come learn what forecasting is all about. So that's kind of how I got started in that. And so I left creative writing for a bit, came back for my PhD, and spent about 14 months in total sitting in different forecast offices, watching forecasters issue warnings, asking them questions, learning about their challenges, and that's what I'm working on now.
Wow, very cool.
And you have an amazing experience, isn't it?
Yeah. Storm chasing changed everything. I mean, it was just, you guys probably have better stories than I do, but just seeing how difficult it is to forecast, seeing its impact on communities, spending all day in a van.
I mean, can you get anything better than the van witch, though? I think most of us here, Caitlin, sorry, I guess you haven't had that experience
a little bit left out, but
yeah, we'll bring you one next week.
Well, don't worry,
you're
gonna have
it live on
I
air.
can't wait.
Don't worry.
You learn to find creative ways to make the sandwiches taste so much better.
Oh my God, the cooler.
Yeah, the cooler. It's a major staple in every storm chase. So. Well, that's great. And you actually have a dissertation coming up very soon, right? So you've been hitting the books hard here the last few weeks, right?
Yeah, so I'm in the dissertation phase. I've been there for about a year and a half, and that just means that I joke, I'm a mole person. I spend all my time in the dark in my basement writing by myself, and it's a very strange process. I have a fabulous committee, but I'm trying to graduate in December, so I'm sort of at the end of it. And tomorrow for Halloween, I will be getting comments back from my committee, which means I'll spend Halloween understanding what they think of my work for some of them the first time.
I mean, wouldn't it just be awesome to experience that as a tree? I'm just saying.
Jamie.
Okay, I'll let it
let
drop
that one
right
go,
now.
honestly.
I'd probably take it much better as a tree.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say to you right now.
Well, I mean that's great, and I know I've been following close, and we've been playing tag at different major weather conferences. Whether it be the American Meteorological Society conference or National Weather Association, most of which we just run into each other in the hallway of.
Drive by hugging.
I know, it's like, hey, you're here too. Yeah, you're here. But it's been great, kind of following along your path, and I look forward to seeing where you go in the future and living vicariously through you. Because I don't think PhDs for me. I just.
Come on,
It's so
Jamie.
funny because I spend my life living vicariously through the forecasters. So we're right
We'll just have to swap once a week or something like that, just to kind of keep it going. But so you spent a lot of of your research time into something I don't know much about, and that's the social science aspect of meteorology.
Yeah.
Let's just start with the basics. So what is the study of social science? And then I guess relate it back to meteorology, and we'll talk a little bit about where it's going from here. But start, with the basics. What is social science?
Such a great question. I think, in the forecasting community, since I started in, 2011, really with my PhD, I've had this question several times, and I think it's like asking what's the physical sciences like. Like there's dozens of disciplines, everything from chemistry and physics and meteorology to geography, geology. There's so many different kinds, but they're studying the physical processes and trying to understand what's happening in the natural world. Well, so for social sciences, we're a huge cluster of disciplines as well. Everything from anthropology, political science, history, sociology, anthropology, geography. I mean, we've got so many different disciplines, but the common thing that unites us is trying to understand society and humans. So how do people interact with their world? How do they interact with each other? In my case, in science and technology studies, how are the technical and the non-technical of the world sort of working together and shaping each other? So in terms of forecasting, looking at how forecasters are issuing warnings and what's the warning technology like, and what kinds of headaches do they encounter with WarnGen and AWIPS, and also just the dissemination of the warning itself through multiple kinds of processes, including humans. So social sciences really tries to understand all of these different human elements and societal elements and cultural elements. And so when you think of social sciences, it's helpful to think of so many different disciplines that are focused on different questions. And one of the things I think that's tricky in the meteorology community is we're kind of a new breed to the meteorologists. Like, what is a social scientist? We're also very different, and not every social scientist does the same kind of work as you might expect in the physical scientists. So you might want somebody, for example, who helps you understand language, like, what's the best wording that we should use in a warning? Well, that might be a very specific kind of social scientist that you would need, who would do like experimental testing with different populations, develop prototypes, and then maybe you want somebody who can help you, look at like the cultural issues that are happening around a Spanish-speaking community, and how are they understanding warning? Well, that's a very different kind of social scientist. So I think one of the challenges in terms of working together as scientists, physical and social, is just making sure that we kind of understand each other's assumptions and worldviews and how we come to those questions, and knowing that just like in a forecast office you've got a hydrologist and a meteorologist, they're not looking at the same thing. No two social scientists are necessarily looking at the same thing from different disciplines. So that's kind of a big overview of social science. I come from an anthropological and historical and philosophical sort of tradition. So the way that I think about us working together with meteorologists is not just answering questions that we come up with, because social scientists, we got lots of questions about you people. What's going on? How do we get started? What's happening in the meteorological community? What's happening in storm chase communities? How are they affecting the populations that they interact with? That kind of thing. But I'm also curious, it's really important for us to understand what's happening in the forecast offices, so that we're not just what's going on with forecasters, but what questions do forecasters have? So it's really, if you think about research to operations, but you think about it including the social sciences, it's not just like, hey, let's understand this one thing and kind of go in one direction out this way and look out this way together in the distance. Let's look back the other direction too and see what's happening. So we're trying to look both directions, at the meteorologists and out at the different kinds of publics that are happening, and what kinds of questions do we have about each other, and how can we answer those?
Yeah, and I think really the worst person to have doing that type of thing is a hard science. I'm sorry, I don't mean to use hard science, but like physical scientists looking at that. Because as a physical scientist, it's not the first thing on my mind on, okay, why didn't that get out? It was out. I know I had 7 minutes of lead time. I know, all these statistics about it. But I don't understand why certain people didn't take the message, and that's a huge issue in our society right now. We've talked about it on past shows, but what causes the person to drive through the flooded roadways? What can we do better to connect with them? Because honestly, it just doesn't make sense to us why they would do it, and that's when your role would step up, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the big questions that comes up in the forecast offices when I'm there. They're like, well, you're going to help us understand people. I'm like, yeah, including yourselves.
And that's a big issue,
as much
too.
as possible, right?
But no, I mean,
Work in progress.
Those kinds of questions I think are really important, because not only do you have those questions, we share those interests. I think, those of us in the social science community who work with forecasters, we have the same general vision for protecting people. That's
That's the goal.
That's where we all come together. It's like, well, yeah, I want my community to be safe from weather hazards. I want to understand why people either don't get information or can't respond. Sometimes it's an issue of access. They don't have resources. They, one of the big questions that I think we don't ask as a community is, what is a warning? And how does that question mean different things to different people? Because we assume we know what a warning is. We're like, oh, it's a polygon. Or, oh, it's this text or it's this language. It says take shelter. But, warnings can mean a lot of different things.
Right.
This is true.
So, yeah, this social science thing is all very new to me. But as a communications major, I plan to go into broadcast meteorology. And I think that is a huge aspect of this. Like, how can we effectively get this out to the public? I don't know. It's just something I never considered.
Yes. And as somebody who's on television, as you know, or on radio, you're sort of that conduit directly to people in the community. So they see you, they're going to read your body language, they're going to build trust in you. So yeah, it's a huge responsibility, and I think a lot of people who are doing communication work in the social sciences and the research area are trying to inform what's happening on air. How do you build that kind of trust? I'm sure you guys all know James Spann. He's one of the sort of masters at this, building trust in this community. Yeah, but that's one of the questions several of my colleagues. So not only do we look at different kind of aspects of the problems, but some of us look at different sectors. I focus on the weather service primarily, but a lot of my colleagues are working with broadcasters.
Right.
Because the challenges aren't the same across.
Right, of course.
We think of the public as like one monolithic, like the public. But that's almost as silly as thinking of everybody as the forecaster.
Exactly.
Or the expert.
It's a lot more
They're
complicated.
So different. Yeah.
And you brought up James Spann, and I know a lot of this stuff is often highlighted by big events. Our failures are often highlighted by big events rather than the successes of those events, just because we're under the microscope and it's so high profile. When I first started hearing about James Spann and his quest in the social science type arena, trying to understand why, was after the 2011 tornado outbreak down in Alabama. I know there was a lot of deaths that, in a way, it seemed like he took personal responsibility for those types of deaths because he didn't get the word out as well as he should have. And I don't feel like that was the primary issue. I don't think it was the weather service. I don't think it was James. I think it was a combination, and a lot of it's just the system itself. And that's when it first started getting highlighted for me. Is the social science aspect of meteorology only that old, or has it been going on forever?
We're very old. No, I love this question, and I'm so glad you raised it, because I think one of the things that, as a historian, that I'm really interested in is, where did some of our language and our ideas about the warning system come from? And if you look back at there were service assessments conducted by the Weather Service, then the Weather Bureau. 1965 Palm Sunday outbreak. If you go back to that assessment, they talk about needing surveys from social and behavioral scientists.
Really?
So a lot of that kind of history comes from the hazards community, where right after World War II and the kind of Cold War understanding of duck and cover videos that you've seen, that kind of model got imported into disaster science. Like, how do we understand what to do in terms of a massive tornado? Well, the proxy was, let's look at what we're doing for Cold War preparations and vice versa. So the two kind of got wrapped up together. But you had a lot of social science researchers in the 1950s and 1960s studying disasters. So forecasters were aware of them then. I found evidence of that in the 65 report. They show up occasionally in those reports. And in the 1960s and 70s, they were starting to be recruited to work with forecasters when they were developing workstations in the forecast office. So when they were developing the early AWIP systems, that if you go into a forecast office today, there's those complex computers that forecasters use. They had psychologists working with forecasters then to understand how they were interacting, like basically human-computer interaction stuff that we call today. They were doing that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
That's amazing.
So they've been working with the Weather Service in different forms for a long time, but it really took off in like the mid-2000s. I think where meteorologists and the National Weather Service started to say, okay, we need to bring these people in more substantially. And then I think actually 2011 was a kind of benchmark year, both Joplin and then the Alabama tornadoes and Mississippi tornadoes. Those two events, I think, it kind of took the community by surprise. I mean, if you look back at some of the conversations happening then, people were thinking, we've got all this great technology, our warnings are so much better, our lead times are better. How how did so many people die?
How did that still happen?
Yeah.
And so this was the question, and it's all about the humans. What happened with the humans?
Yeah.
So
How's that connection?
And again, here locally, I know you were involved with the 2012 damage assessment, or not, the post-assessment survey of that. And the derecho around here, no one knew what that word was.
Right.
But I know now, especially as meteorology majors, we know. But I'll bet you that Joe Schmo now knows.
Oh, yeah.
Public now knows because it just
You
has
almost have to
such-
be really careful in your use of that word now.
Yeah,
because it's just that
yeah.
event changed so many people's perception of what a derecho is. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and now it's so attention grabbing that some responsibly and some not responsibly are kind of putting it out there just to get people moving, you know. And in a way, that's good that they're responding, but it's also maybe not so good because you're starting to get that boy who cried wolf thing. You know, if we say we're going to have something to the effect of a derecho, you know, that storm system was so rare. Its strength was so rare,
Yes.
especially in this area, that it really shook people. That's why people remember it. But it does not always mean that every time you're going to have that type of event, you're going to have that type of damage.
Exactly.
And it's very difficult to kind of talk between the two. But on the bright side, going forward, and right before we go to a song here, just is this role of social science meteorology, it seems to me like it's increasing, and I hope for my job that it's going to continue increasing. But do you see it in that general trend, an increasing role? Or I think it was funny, we were at sorry to cut you off, but we were at a thing, and I think the Weather Service has officially hired one social scientist. That was a huge
Wow.
accomplishment for us. It's like, one? We have 122 offices, and we have one on staff, and
Wow.
that's a huge step for us, but I think there's plenty of room to grow. But as a social scientist, do you think we should incorporate you more, less? Where do you see us going?
yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of a self-serving question.
Yeah.
Yes, hire us. I'm looking for a job. Yeah, no, but I mean, I think, NOAA's interesting because, there's the wet side and the dry side. So there's the coastal
Right.
and there's the weather side. The coastal side hires a lot of social scientists. They work with a lot of different communities. So if you look at one side of NOAA, there's a ton of social scientists working there. But you're right, in the Weather Service itself, I think I know of 3 social scientists that are actually working either affiliated or working for NOAA, but with the National Weather Service. But yeah, I think not only do I think we need to work together, but I think we need to integrate sort of our expertise a little bit more. I think this kind of siloed effect where, the meteorologists only learn the science, it's always been strange to me that, it's like being a physician, where you would just study physiology and the body, and then you would go into an area where now you have to diagnose something and tell a person what's going on. That takes more training than just the physiology of the body. You have to
Yeah, I
know
completely agree.
all the not only the ethical dimensions, the social dimensions. What's it like to talk to somebody and tell them they're dying? What's it like to mess up and have to live with that guilt? You talked about forecasters being affected by post-traumatic stress.
Oh, yeah.
Forecasters, we don't even know anything about it. They're often
Wow.
first responders when they go out on these damage assessments. We know almost nothing about how that responds. Shift work, how does that affect the body? Mortality, morbidity for forecasters, we know nothing about that. So you all function in a lot of ways as first responders and as people who I think move from science into being prescribers of action, and you have a huge responsibility. I think it would be helpful if, some of the knowledges of social science were better integrated into the educational tracks themselves. I think the forecaster of the future is very different from the forecaster of the past.
Oh, yeah.
I think the institution of National Weather Service is starting to see that. Broadcasters are starting to see that. You need multiple skills. So we need our educational system, I think, to reflect that.
It's amazing. All right. Well, I'm truly fascinated by all of this. I could just sit here and listen to you
I
talk
do.
all day,
I'm
Jen.
speechless over here.
It's amazing. But we got to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we're going to talk about the National Weather Service's watch warning and advisory system. So please come back and join us.
Never wanted anything but this. I worked hard, tried hard. I ran around in domestic bliss. I got face, no home. Your words surround me, asphyxiate, and I burn all hate. Every time you're running out on me, every time you're ready, I can see I'm not a festival. I will not control myself. I spit on heaven feeds me. I will not control myself. The water's spray, the water's running all over me. The water's spray, the water's rain, and this time you're gonna pay. I'm not a festival. I will not control myself. Spit on heaven feeds me. I will not control myself.
All right, welcome back to Hokie Weather Watch Live here on WVT 90.7 FM Blacksburg. We've got Jen Henderson with us today, and just had an amazing talk about social science and its role in meteorology. What exactly is social science, and how does it play along in the future of our field? And now we're going to talk about the National Weather Service and its watch, warning, and advisory system. And this is something that we've talked about actually on the show before. So Jen, I'm curious, how's that system doing? How does it work?
Put you on the spot. Solve the problem. Go.
Yeah, solve the problem.
Not to punt the question, but I think it depends on who you ask, honestly,
Yes.
how it's doing. I mean, the work that's being done to try and revise the watch warning advisory system suggests that there's a significant problem with it. One of the questions I think a lot of social scientists have, and this is part of the work that's being done, is what is the problem, and how do we know there's a problem, and what kinds of problems are we seeing? So it's a question, I guess, how it's doing. If you talk to a lot of weather service people, a lot of emergency managers, they have several stories within their communities about, people misunderstanding watch and warnings. You see stories every year where people are like, oh, it downgraded to an advisory, and people are like, no, it's not, it's not a downgrade, and the advisory, and what is an advisory?
Right.
So I think there's a lot of evidence anecdotally that people have in their different forecast offices and in their different CWAs that there's a misunderstanding. There's not a whole lot of research out there, though, empirically to actually quantify or identify or really clearly illuminate this is exactly the kind of problem. We have kind of our speculation. So I think right now hazard simplification is one of the first things that they're trying to do is understand how do people understand watch warning advisories?
Right.
What are the challenges that they see? Before we move on to what's the fix, which of course there's never going to be a fix.
Right.
There's way too many people to say what fix.
Yeah.
So I think there's a consensus that there's a problem. I don't think we all clearly understand what the problem exactly is. There's a lot of speculation around different aspects, but
Yeah, and I think simplification is a huge issue. If you look at, especially in the wintertime, if you look at if you go to weather.gov, you'll see that map of all the hazards and all the colors of each hazard. And,
Shameless
A
plug.
lot of
oh
that.
yeah, shameless plug to our website. But you just see it's basically someone threw a paintbrush against the wall. You have greens, you have pinks, you have yellows, you have different shades of pink, and
I think there's 48 different watches, warnings, and advisories.
I thought there was more than that. I'm not 100, but
there's
yeah.
122 different products, 130.
Oh, okay, my
bad.
It's over 100. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's surprising because there's just so many possibilities out there, and I think that is an issue. And then each one has its own criteria, and luckily I think the Weather Service is slowly going away from a set threshold. For instance, right now the the severe. For a storm to be severe, it's either producing 58-mile-an-hour winds or quarter size hail, the size of a quarter or greater. Around here, it's tough because how often do you actually measure the true wind of a thunderstorm?
Right.
It's very rare, and you just don't have the sensors anywhere in the country really to do that. So the way we kind of grade ourselves is based on damage that occurs, whether it's through buildings, infrastructure, or just trees down. In our forecast area, and this varies through every forecast area. Our forecast area for wind, it's 2 trees down. But you don't, especially if it's wet, you don't need 2 trees to come down to be. Or it's very easy for 2 trees to come down.
Right.
So how is that actually, if we have 4 days of rain followed by a windstorm, you're going to have tree damage everywhere. Do we need to issue 40 to 60 severes because of that? It's a question that's been raised, and fortunately, we're going away from those thresholds, or hopefully we'll be going away from those thresholds and doing impact-based warnings, and that's something you might have worked with in the past, and I love your opinion on that. But it's about what type of hazards will be present with this situation rather than are we going to hit that 58 mile an hour because we're 57 we fail versus if we're 59 we pass. It's a terrible way to look at it.
Right. Well, going back to looking at like maps and such, if it's confusing for people like us to look at and kind of comprehend, can you imagine how
Just
the general
imagine the
public
general
sees
public.
it? It's too much for them to look at and understand, so it's just kind of brushed off or, well, I have no idea, so.
Yeah, so they turn on their local TV news and they go to their trusted.
Yeah, hopefully.
That
Yeah.
liaison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great illustration of why it's important to integrate actually social science and physical science, because what you described is the threshold being 58 miles per hour is more an atmospheric
Right.
meteorological condition, right? That's looking up and saying, okay, here's what's happening in the sky and here's what it's going to do to these trees, but that has very little to say about what it's doing to people. And what their different thresholds are, what they need to understand. And so bringing in, I think the word impact sort of talks and brings together those two communities. We need to understand the meteorological conditions and the science of that. We also need to understand the human side.
How
We
it's
need to
gonna
understand
impact people.
what counts as an impact for who is a huge problem. Like, and I know the impacts catalog, if you guys have heard of this in the Weather Service, they're trying to put together a catalog where different users can say, here's what the kind of threshold is for my community or for me, and we're going to make a catalog of that and sort of look at common issues that come up, common thresholds that come up for different communities, but allowing these decision makers and allowing members of the public to sort of give input into what is the impact it has on their lives helps forecasters understand, our thresholds are different. And it's just a concrete example of this. In the 2012 derecho, one of the things that happened is there was a huge heat wave after, you might remember.
Oh, yes.
And it was for days. Well, people had lost air conditioning, they had lost refrigeration. You have to have certain warnings in place in order to trigger cooling centers to open. So an impact on an emergency manager or somebody who's in that community is, I need to have a warning issued for you for an excessive heat warning or something. That allows me the justification and the funding to open my cooling center. But if you don't know that as a forecaster, you might be issuing a warning based on just atmospheric criteria. Oh, here's our threshold for heat. And if it hits those thresholds, then we issue it. But you might not know that actually people are suffering at much lower temperatures than the threshold, and you need to open cooling centers. So you have to have people who understand sort of these situational and these societal issues happening too.
Yeah, sticking with thresholds, one interesting dilemma that our office faces is we have 2 basically different terrain types. We have the mountainous terrains versus the eastern Piedmonts. Then we've had the western slopes, so that's getting into a whole new ball game there. So when it comes to winter weather headlines, our thresholds are completely different comparing the mountains to the Piedmont. For instance, 4 inches of snow in Roanoke would trigger a warning. If 4 inches of snow in I think it's 12 hours would trigger a warning in Roanoke, but it would not trigger a warning at Blacksburg. So what is your opinion on having those different thresholds? Because in a way, 8 inches of snow in Maine is nothing compared to 8 inches of snow in North Carolina. So what's your
very
opinion
true.
on those types of differences?
Really?
Anybody? Does anybody have an
Sorry, I
opinion
didn't know if I
on
was gonna
having
jump in.
different thresholds?
No, I mean, I think it's important. Like, I was just thinking about this as she was speaking. Like you said, it's not the same. We don't all have the same type of weather or climate across the entire region or even, like, across the whole country. So our winter weather is expected to be a lot worse than somewhere in North Carolina. And like you said, it's going to trigger different responses from the public. So we have to consider how the weather affects different places and
And
such.
the
Yeah.
timing of the weather, I mean, is
Oh,
a
yeah.
huge aspect of it.
And that's where the impact-based warning comes in. You know, if you're going to get 3 inches at rush hour, it's anywhere, it's going to be a problem. Versus 3 inches on a Sunday on a holiday when people don't have to travel with snow already on the ground. You know, you're not going to have any issue or many issues there comparatively. But then you run into, look at I-81. You know, I-81 out of Montgomery County, you're coming from a higher threshold, which may have an advisory going into Roanoke County. And as the Joe Schmo public looks at it, you know, if you're going and all of a sudden you see on the sign, winter storm warning ahead, but you're not in it now, and you're seeing just as bad impacts, but then you actually get in Roanoke, it's a little less, but it's still warning criteria, and it could certainly have some confusion to the general public. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting hurdle we'll have to get over.
I think that's one of the big challenges with the watch warning advisory system and also the revision of that with hazard simplification is, you know, yes, we want to simplify so that it's understandable and not confusing given all the colors and the thresholds and the impacts and the criteria. But we also have to admit that each individual forecast office has so many different geographies and populations among them. So this idea of consistency versus individualized sort of specialized forecasting. How does a national system that has these standards across everything, how do we make it consistent in terms of the standards, but recognize that our populations and our geographies are so varied
So completely different.
and over short distances too.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you take that into account? And I think this is part of why you have so many different products right now, is it's trying to account for all the different kinds of things that you can have going on at one
Right.
time. That complexity is trying to reflect in some ways what's actually happening atmospherically and how complex it is. So I think that's a challenge, is how do you simplify it to just a few, in the hazard simplification project, a few colors, a few tiers. How do you simplify it so that you don't lose the ability to be flexible,
Right.
but you keep that idea of being consistent?
I think one of the most confusing ones is like a flash flood warning comparative to like a tornado warning. Like tornado warning, like wow, red, like oh, dangerous. But then flash flood warning, which kills more people than
Right.
tornadoes on an annual
It's
basis.
just as dangerous.
It's just
if
as
not more.
dangerous, but it's a
Exactly.
green polygon. It's like, oh, green, that means
Right.
light rain. Oh, that's no big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
The color system is very confusing, but then again, if you had a flash flood warning in red and a tornado warning in red, and someone just looks at a graphic instead of listening to the text, or listening to either reading the text or listening to a broadcast meteorologist, I mean, how often do you guys go through Facebook and just, instead of listening because you might be in class or something, you know, you just kind of look at the video as it automatically plays, you know? So if you're looking at that and you see a red polygon over Virginia Tech and you start hiding under your desk, or going to a basement during a flash flood,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
could have some
Right.
issues that way.
Yes, totally. I'm sorry, Jamie just threw it to me. We got to do a shameless plug for Radiothon. It's our last day for Radiothon. If you like what you're listening to right now and the music that you hear on this station, why don't you pledge? Of course, you love hearing us talk about the weather. You know that you love Hokie Weather Watch. So it's the last day. We really could use your pledge. Move it going. Move it weird, I think is the slogan for Radiothon. So
Yeah, and without Wove, we would not be here.
we would not be here. So
I'm very thankful for this opportunity, able to come onto your airways once a week, and they need your help at this point, and
That's right.
and we need your help.
we need your help. So donate, please.
All right, quick check on Twitter.
Yeah, go for it.
yeah.
Savannah actually did.
Oh snap!
Oh,
back.
okay.
Uh-huh.
She wanted to
There
say
it is.
thank you, Jamie, and she's telling everyone that she's here and listening. Hashtag Vanwich for life.
All right, we got one listener.
Vanwich for
Thank you,
life.
Savannah.
Oh, my
Vanwich,
goodness.
I love it. Got the one.
I had a question about what we were just talking about. We talked about the difficulties simplifying the watch and warning system. What about, because I know different weather service offices, what happens when they disagree? Because I know that we draw our polygons, and I think we've all seen where a polygon looks so weird because there are different Jamie, you can probably talk about this a little bit, but there's different opinions on what exactly the atmosphere is going to throw our way. How does that impact the current system and how we can maybe simplify across the country?
Yeah, the collaboration between offices is essential. And some offices are better than others, and I'm not saying ours is nearly perfect. And I
Right.
think we all have ways to improve, but you know, there's a lot that goes into drawing those specific polygons. Whether it's you know, just trying to line them up with each other. If it's a pretty large area of threat versus a tornado, you know, if you launch a tornado warning and nothing occurs in your half of the CWA, you know, you're going to trigger a lot of emergency services that may not be needed. So, knowing exactly where the center of that rotation is and where the tornado threat is very important. So it can be definitely difficult. And we do see some funky polygons, whether it's just somebody trying to maintain within a boundary, or if it's an unusually shaped or unusual weather pattern. You know, you can certainly have that too. But it's important for us to all collaborate, and we're weak at it. We're definitely weak, and unfortunately the boundaries are there, so you do have that discrepancy. But it's really up to us as forecasters to reach out to the other offices, and don't be afraid to call them, and don't be afraid to have a beneficial discussion about, all right, what do you think? Even if you disagree, you know, what's the impacts? You know, even if it's not a tornado, are you still getting some some
damaging winds?
Winds, and in a way, you know, with the derecho type damage, that was worse off for the region, because instead of a quarter-mile in width path, you have this thing that's our whole forecast area that saw massive tree damage. So, you know, in a way, having strong wording or issuing a warning which is a little bit too far up there wouldn't have been a bad thing, but you know, it's just one of those things we have to work on.
Just work together as a team. I feel like that's really difficult at times, especially when you're not so sure about the forecast as a whole.
Right.
And uncertainty is definitely a player in the forecast. I feel like that's really difficult. So
yeah, we had this is actually leads right into the point we have, and I would love your opinion on this, Jen. This past year we had some devastating flooding in Greenbrier County.
Yes.
This was this past June. And so it took a lot of coordination with Charleston, West Virginia, to figure out, okay, what are the hardest hit areas? What type of flooding would you have going on? We have to communicate with people on the ground, because, you know, our radar is saying 8 to 10 inches in a 12-hour period. Well, of course there's going to be flooding, but how bad is the flooding? You know, was it dry beforehand? Was it wet? You know, all those factors have a lot to do with what happens. And, you know, I was lucky or unlucky enough to do part of the damage survey afterwards, and it was just incredible the type of damage we saw. And I think our forecasts were there, but there is a disconnect between our forecast, people receiving the forecast, and the actions that were taken by those people. And for instance, you know, I was talking to one group whose house unfortunately flooded, and actually they knew the person's house that was floating down Howard Creek on the golf course up there, the Greenbrier. And there was a video going around of it on fire as it impacted the bridge. Yeah, so, and unfortunately we lost 16 people in our forecast area during that storm in Greenbrier County alone. So we started talking to people like, hey, did you guys get the warning? Because the warnings were out. There was plenty of lead time. In fact, there might have been too much lead time. We ended up issuing a flash flood emergency, which is very rare, especially for us. But it was very important because it tells people exactly how bad the situation is. You know, it's a step up on the impacts. And people were like, oh, no, we didn't get the warning. And so we're like, oh, you guys didn't get the flash flood warning on your cell phones or on no weather radio or anything like that? And she was like, oh, no, we got that warning. And you're like, well, but the thing is, they weren't prepared for how devastating the event is.
Even though they got the warning.
Even though they got the warning, they didn't think they were warned because the creek's never been up this high. So how are we warned if the creek has never gotten up here, or we didn't specifically say the creek was going to get their house, you know? So you've run into this, I'm sure, between your assessments and stuff. Is there a better way to go about this, or is it just one of those things where the Weather Service needs to realize we're not going to hit everybody, but still, I think 16 people in a flooding type incident, you know, those are a little bit longer range, but still very, you need to act now type of thing. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's so much to talk about.
Oh yeah.
We could go for hours and hours. Yeah. Well, so I want to hit on this idea first of all of people dying, which I think is, you know, it's probably the most compelling reason that we make changes to systems is we say, well, you might have heard this phrase, 0 deaths. That the aim is 0 deaths. And what we know from a lot of research and risk assessment and you know, people who've done research on this and who do research every day, it's impossible to get to 0 deaths. It's just not even as hard because people can do the right thing and still die, right? So this idea that we have that if we could just make the perfect system, no one would die, but that's not how the world actually operates. I mean, you know, the example I think of is the Moore tornadoes in 2013 where those school kids died. They were huddled in hallways and they were doing everything that was right, and then the heavy rains hit and the school
There's only so much we can do.
And and there's only so much you can do. So I don't want to say that that's not trying to bypass your question, but I do think I know that this number of people dying haunts the community. It haunts the social scientists too. We want to make sure that people are safe. We want to give everybody the opportunity to save themselves and do take the actions that they think are best for them. But yeah, of course, I think there are improvements to be made in the system. I mean, as you said, you can issue a flash flood emergency. Do people actually know what the word emergency means? They understand,
especially if
the
they've never heard it
magnitude of
before.
that. Yeah. So one of the questions I have, I know that that's part of impact-based warnings. What does emergency mean? For example, they found that in Spanish-speaking communities, the word emergency and the word warning are very similar in their interpretation. So actually issuing an emergency didn't have a significant effect over a warning. What do people think of when they hear an emergency? And also, what should they do? I mean, I think of myself as a person in the public, and I think, okay, well, if I got a flash flood emergency, sure, I would try to get to higher ground. I would try to, but there's only so much I could even do as a person in this community to save myself. And maybe those emergencies are coming with enough time, and maybe they're not. Maybe there are other things that are happening infrastructurally, like roadways, or I might have kids in school. Maybe the schools aren't closing down. Maybe my job's not letting me out. I think that there's a broader community that has to have a conversation here about what do we do when the weather looks this bad. It can't be just the emergency management and the forecast community. It's got to be
outside.
Employers. It's got to be other people in the community saying, you know what, this looks like it's going to be so bad, we're going to kind of shut things down. Because people will make decisions based on what they perceive to be their biggest risk. And if the risk of losing their job is higher than the risk they perceive for a flash flood or a flash flood emergency,
they're going to go to work.
They're going to go to work. I mean, a colleague of mine, Cedar League, who did research on why people crossed roads, she interviewed people from YouTube that she tracked down and asked them if they would talk to her. And these were the number one reasons why people crossed flooded roads. One, they didn't know the ways around. They didn't have alternatives. And they had to get to the other side. There was something on the other side. Often it was kids or work. And then there is some, we don't understand the threat, and we didn't know that so little water could move a car and it could become so dangerous. That, of course, is there. But I think there's things beyond weather that we don't necessarily account for in our system that forecasters can't really do. But if you're talking to different communities, if you're talking to school districts, if you're talking to employers, if there's a broader community plan and you understand those kinds of decision-making things, thresholds, then maybe those people could be convinced by the forecast to take actions that allow individuals to take different actions too. So that's not quite getting at, it's not an answer, but I think it's got to be bigger than just us.
Yeah,
It is.
I definitely
Absolutely.
agree. And you mentioned a few times, and I think I did too, we could talk about this topic
hours.
all day.
For hours.
And unfortunately, we're down to just minutes.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to challenge you real fast, Jen,
Yeah, sure.
as our guest. Name one thing that the system does well.
One thing that the system, you mean the warning system?
The warning system, the watch warning advisory system. Can you pick out a positive in it that we could
Yeah.
go forward with?
That's such a great question. Let me
Yeah.
think. Well, I mean, so the system has been around a long time, and I think that the difficulty in finding the success is seeing that it's already been so infrastructurally and institutionalized in our system that we don't actually see how it's already working. But one of the positives I would say is that, and this is the problem with changing it, is that because we have such in the watch and a warning difference, does that mean they know what to do?
Right.
There's not necessarily a correlation between understanding and defining language and taking action. So that's part of it too.
Okay. Well, Stephanie, we hate to cut you off, but
Jen, sorry.
we are
That's
at the
okay.
end of our show. Do we want a forecast?
Just quick, dirty forecast.
All right, so it's going to be pretty nice over the past few days. We're going to be switching the calendar over to November, but it's starting to be feeling like September, maybe October, which is kind of crazy. But we will have a cold front moving in around Thursday night, which will bring the temperatures back down to around 66.
Okay.
So enjoy the weather while
Cool,
it lasts.
cool.
Yeah, enjoy this
Yeah,
week.
nice.
Short and sweet, to
And
the point.
Jen, thank you so much for
Oh,
being
that's
here.
awesome.
Yes,
We'll have to
thank you, Jen.
continue this on after your dissertation
Yes.
research, and you've solved the problem.
And
So
thank-
no
and
pressure.
And you've solved the problem. No,
pressure. And
no
thanks
pressure.
for the service. You guys are doing a great thing here at Virginia Tech. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
what you're doing.
All right. For Jamie, Jen,
Caitlin.
Caitlin, and Aaron, I'm so sorry. This is Hokie Weather Watch Live. I'm Nick, and we'll see you next week.